My U.S. history class at Rosewood, that's always doing good, to breakdown of our first lesson, the world before Columbus. And in my opinion, and a lot of historians' opinion, 1492 is the most important year in history. The world before that year is a completely different place than after 1492. And if you click on this link, you will see there is a PowerPoint and some wrap-up questions. And I have the PowerPoint ready to go right here. And again, 1491, before Columbus arrived. So the world before Columbus, it was in four big sections, and they did not mix with each other. They simply did not mix with each other. There was a couple isolated incidents, but by and large, they were four separate worlds. So the world we live in was called the Americas. In purple here was Afro-Eurasia, where a lot of the action happens in world history. Here's Egypt and ancient China and Mesopotamia and Persia and India. Okay, so a lot was going on the purple. Australasia in pink, and then the Pacific are these islands in the Pacific Ocean. A third of the world, size-wise, but only 1% of the population. So my big point, before Columbus, four separate worlds. The Pacific, the Americas, Afro-Eurasia, and Australasia. And we started off with a hypothesis. I understand we're new to this, and you worked with somebody else, your best guess. So number one, how many indigenous people were in North America in 1491? Number two, what were the differences in the peoples that existed here in 1491? How did the indigenous people, the original people, now in Canada they're called First Nation, in America they're called Native Americans, American Indians. Indigenous are the original people. So how did they get here? Number four, what percentage of indigenous people died as a result of people from the quote unquote New World who arrived from Europe? And again, calling it Old World, New World, people were already here. Now that term is used meaning New World, Columbus, and moving forward. Old World before Columbus, going backwards. Now, what were the causes of the indigenous people's death? Now, that traditional story of Christopher Columbus, the brave sailor who thought the world was flat, trying to find India, finds America. Now, I'm going to tell that story in class, but that traditional story, is it correct? Now, if not, what is incorrect about that story? And let's look at today. How are indigenous people doing today? What are they doing to preserve their cultures? Well, here's the answers. So, how many indigenous people were in North America in 1491? The best estimate is about 4 to 5 million were in the USA and Canada, and 60 million in all of the Americas. I'm talking from Panama all the way to the Arctic Circle, so a lot of people. What were the differences in the people that existed here? Whatever you said, you're probably going to be right. As many differences in how you went about living, differences in language and religious beliefs and practices, a lot of differences. I think the easy number to remember, there were 375 different languages spoken on the continent. I don't know if I can come up with 375 different languages today. I'd have a real hard time figuring that one out. The third question, how did indigenous people of North America get here? Now, there was a land bridge, okay, an ice bridge that connected where Russia is to Alaska, and over the span of hundreds and thousands of years, they made their way all the way south to Argentina. And the last part of the world to get filled up was North America. The question of how many indigenous people died once New World arrivals came, 90%. And that's a pretty awful statistic. I don't need to say anything more than that, but 9 out of 10 died from this. And the reasons why, disease, especially smallpox. Here's some good news. Smallpox got eradicated when I was a little kid. It's not around anymore. Don't need you to worry about it, but it was a real problem for centuries and centuries. And there was violence, famine, displacement, which means you get kicked out and have to walk far away to a new place that was less pleasant than your old place, and forced labor. So it's a pretty awful chapter in history. In fact, historians call it the Great Dying, which I think is pretty accurate thing to call it. Now, is the traditional story of Columbus correct? If not, what's incorrect? Well, we came up with a lot of things in class, but a couple main things. He never set foot in America proper, not once. He was in the Caribbean. Also, he didn't think the earth was flat. Okay, that's a myth as well. Last question. How are Indigenous people doing today? What are they trying to do to preserve their culture? It's really mixed. Some are doing better than others. Again, there's so much diversity in the Indigenous communities. You can't say it's one flavor. Some are doing better than others. But I will say all of them are trying to preserve their language, their culture, their traditions, and their histories. So this class is important. Just having non-Indigenous people like ourselves know at least the basics of the story is important for them to be known. So that's the point of today. So this map gives you a little idea of the diversity in all these words here. And there's hundreds of these words. These people were completely different. They had different practices, and you can see there are a lot of them. I'm not asking you to memorize these. That would be cruel. We'd be doing this all year round. But I hope I made my point. There were a ton of different indigenous people went about things quite differently. And this last thing we did in class was I asked you to predict the differences of the following indigenous regions. So instead of, the one before, I mean, that's a little tough. I don't think I could do that myself, but I'm going to simplify it and break them into big regions and ask yourself, what do you think are different? So the big regions are the subarctic, very, very cold, icy. How are people living there? Even further north, the Inuits of up north, the Northwest coast, the California coast, the Plateau people, the Great Basin, the Southwest, Middle America, Great Plains, Eastern Woodlands, Southeast. And I had you hypothesize why. And I'm thinking people said, well, if you live along the coast, fishing's probably your thing. Absolutely. Hey, here, aren't there a lot of buffalo and those sorts of things? Absolutely. So these people are probably working on fishing. These people are working on hunting. Some parts of the country, things grow very easily. And you're saying, well, shoot, if food grows really easily, probably they're farmers, absolutely. Okay, hey, there's deer in Michigan, there's buffalo here, there's fish here. Hey, isn't this kind of hot and desert-like? Where are they going to make their houses out of? Okay, so you get the point, and so that's, I think it's probably based on geography. And think of it this way, people use what they're given. Okay. If you're given, a certain situation, you do your best with that situation. And these people lived in very different places and different situations. Some places were easier to live in than others, if you get that. And the wrap up questions I'm going to ask you to do is just a recap of the day, the four zones, those 7 questions I asked you, and then the main regions of indigenous people. Okay. So, I'm glad we're getting started, and I'm looking forward to teaching you the story of U.S. history. And I hope you're all doing well and take good care of yourselves.